Well, thank you for being here, and to those that will watch us online a little later, and glad you're here. And we hope to have started last Wednesday, but we know what happened. And today I said actually this is supposed to be one of the warmer days of the week, but it sure doesn't feel warm out there. But if you're here, it feels good. The sanctuary is a little warm, so that's nice. So enjoy, and I hope that that you are warm at home. We're going to just have our Bible study first and share a little bit of a short Bible study today, but important. And then those of us that are here, will look at our prayer list. So, well, if you have your Bibles, you can turn to Exodus chapter 14. And I'm going to keep the whistle wet today. It's dry weather. Exodus chapter 14. Way back before Christmas, the last time we looked at this Israelite journey in the wilderness, we looked at the Israelites at the Red Sea and the waters beginning to be parted, and we talked about that when the waters are divided. Today, we want to look at when we take that step in our life and walk into the sea and walk through the sea. So the children of Israel are going to walk through the sea today. So let me begin with verse 19 today and read down a little bit of what has happened. Then the angel of the Lord, who had been traveling in front of the Israel's army, withdrew and went behind them. The pillar of cloud also moved from in front and stood behind them, coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel. Throughout the night, the cloud brought darkness to the one side and light to the other side, so neither went near the other all night long. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry land with a wall of water on the right and on their left. So the sea is divided all night long by, we kind of think, the breath of God. I also noticed there that at some point, so that the nation of Israel would make sure they knew who was going to deliver them. Did you notice the angel of the Lord takes a back seat and the presence of God comes between the Israelites and the Egyptians in the cloud, so that there's no doubt who is delivering them. It's not going to be an angel. It's not going to be some mystery or it's not going to be a point of debate how they were delivered. It's going to be God. It's going to be God. And then God instructs, he tells Moses, stretches out his hand all night long. It's almost like reaching the breath of God, the wind, but the breath of God parts the waters, this east wind, so that when they get up, still protected by this cloud, the presence of God, now they have a path of dry land. I guess it's hard for us not to imagine the Hollywood picture of that, isn't it? From the Ten Commandments. I mean, how many times have we all seen Charlton Heston divide those waters? And that's a pretty good image. So God's presence has shown up. The waters are divided. And now the Israelites are instructed to walk through the sea. into the sea to safety and keep moving towards the promised land. So let's relate this to life a little bit and our life experiences. We walk this life of faith, and we may be on some type of a faith journey, a God journey. We feel like God is leading us in a direction, or you personally in a direction, to do something with your life. Maybe you're learning something about your faith and you're on a journey. Maybe you started a new ministry or involved in a ministry. Some of y'all were just talking about the Micah, and all of that entails. Or I know Sadie and I and another team are really in the midst of what do we do about benevolence and all these needs that we're getting requests. And so we're always on these journeys, and God provides the way for us. He parts the seas. He gives us opportunities. He opens doors. We maybe begin to see a clear direction or path ahead of us. Maybe it's in the form of a plan. Maybe it's a change where we see a light coming through. And, one day with Micah, you will be cooking and having breakfast in the fellowship hall again. And we'll see that path clearly. But whenever we see the path, that's not the end of it. We've got to take the first step, don't we? We've got to step into the path. We've got to step into the sea. And what a lot of times happens is that when we know we need to take this journey, do something new, advance in our faith, is when I kind of say the ifs of life come into play. If we embark on this new faith journey, if we do this new thing in life that God's asking us to do, we begin to say, but what if? If we start this, what if? What do you think some of the what ifs of if you were a part of that nation of Israel, you were a family, a woman, a mom, whoever, you were a part of that crowd, young girl, and your leader Moses says you look and you see this water divided, but you are going to have to take the step into this what seems land between these waters. What cautions would you have? What would you be asking? What would be your what ifs when you take a step into there? Well, for example, is it going to be muddy? Am I going to make it through all the way before the waters collapse and I drown? What if it's so muddy that I start walking and I sink in the bog to my knees and can't walk anymore and I get stuck? Am I going to get overrun by the Egyptian army when they come after us? What about I just left Egypt with these great new Egyptian sandals. Are they going to get ruined in the mud? Is it going to hurt my belongings, my possessions, my clothes? Do I need to leave anything behind? But you get the picture. The what ifs come into play, don't they? And it reminded me of a New Testament story of Peter, who walked a little bit on the sea, didn't he? Yeah, he didn't walk on dry land. The waters weren't parted, but he sees Jesus coming towards him, walking on water, and Jesus beckons him and says, Peter, if you want to come out to meet me and walk on water, you can. And Peter immediately jumps out of the boat, begins to walk on water. The Bible kind of says his eyes are on Jesus, starting what a new journey of of different level of faith, right? To know Jesus would let him walk on water. But what happens? He took his eyes off Jesus. He began to think of the what ifs. He began to think of, wow, there's waves around me. There's a storm. There's water. This can't be possible. How is this happening? Am I going to drown? Am I safe? And he begins to sink. And Jesus has to, Mark says he immediately reaches out his hand and saves him and lifts him up. And the Bible here says the Israelites didn't, they didn't walk on top of the water. They didn't walk around the water, but they walked through it. They walked through it. They walk into it. They walk into knowing that there can be circumstances that surrounding that the waters were piled up on either side, and as they walk in God's way, in God's direction, with God's protection and God's might, they can look to the right and left and they can see the dangers, can't they? They can easily see what could make them anxious or fearful or run away from God and not trusting. Those anxieties are all around. Those dangers are piled up on either side. And that's the reality of living a life with Jesus here on this earth, is that we walk by faith, and we do walk with great confidence in God. We believe in God. We believe in Jesus. We believe in miracles. We believe in his care. And all of us here this morning have been believers for a long time, and our faith is mature. But yet, no matter how long we follow Christ, and no matter how confident we are, we still walk with the reality of this world. We still walk with the anxieties that surround us. We still walk with fears that can enter our minds as human beings. We still walk, and even though we're walking in faith, tragedy can happen in our life. Difficult days can happen, even when we're walking with God. We're ever surrounded by these things. So we've got to learn somehow to see God in the midst of the storms, in the midst of the walls of water, in the midst of, we know we have an Egyptian army coming behind us. And we need to learn to see God, keep our focus on him, depend on him, keep our vision on him as we journey. And that just takes a lot of spiritual discipline and trust, and seeing, recognizing, and focusing on more of the God moments in our life, the way that God is blessing us, than get into the trap of thinking and only seeing the difficulties and the tragedies of life. Let's think about the recent snowstorm. Some of y'all didn't. How many lost power? I lost power. Yeah. How long, Bev? 2.5. Okay. We were about 48 hours. Yeah. About 8 hours or so. And blessing, Mary didn't lose power. And Sadie? Didn't lose power, but I had my granddaughter and her family. Yeah. So your granddaughter and daughter lost power. Yeah. And some people lost it till the week. Yeah, 5 days, 6 days. Yeah, almost 7 days. Wow. So we hope and pray there's no even little pockets where people are still without it. But when that happens, I'm thinking about my situation, um, and even the snowstorm, maybe how it disrupted your life as you spent those hours or a couple of days without power, or maybe trapped inside with power but couldn't get out. Um, what were some of the negative things that you had to deal with? What were some of the things that you didn't like? Okay, yeah. That was for me. Yeah, some of the negativity of those days was I got a little chillier than usual. We thankfully had some gas fireplace and could eventually keep things in the low 60s, but it was chillier. But I had to, um, when dark came, it got dark. And even with, I thought many times, man, are my ancestors, when it got dark, and I had a couple lanterns that gave pretty good light, battery powered, but some of them just had a candle, and you can't see a whole lot, can you, when it's dark like that? So yeah, we got cold, we got dark. What was the other? Oh, bath, shower. Yeah, a couple of people told me, boy, when they could finally take that long hot shower, how good it felt and how much they missed it, but how much we had gotten used to that. Yeah, we had gas. We had some things on gas, so we had some hot water and warm water. That by the end of that, it was getting lukewarm, but it wasn't a very satisfying, gratifying shower. But we were able to stand it every now and then. So we had these negatives of this experience going on. Um, we were maybe some of us got because we had to sit there. I mean, a lot of our time was when we had things to actively do. We sat there with a quilt on, staying warm, waiting, watching a light, waiting for it to come back on, and we did read, but we got bored, you know, because we're not used to just sitting there and and being quiet. Um, One experience that we had, I think, the second day after it snowed, and we were doing our second dig out. We also had to shovel, didn't we? So we were out. Tammy was out there, and I got ready and went out there, and we were doing some more shoveling, and we have. Does anybody have smart locks on your home? Yeah, yeah, little electric lock. Well, we do too, and I'm still not used to them. I'm still, you know, it'd be okay with me if I just put my key in and unlock the door. But the smart lock is controlled by your cell phone. Um, and, of course, you can use the key as a backup. Well, for 60 years, I go out of the house, and as long as the door's unlocked, I just go back in, don't lock the door. Well, with the smart lock, after 10 or 15 minutes, if you don't attend to it, it automatically locks the door. So you know what's coming. Uh, yeah, it's easy to do manually, but so I went out and we were shoveling for a while, and uh, Tammy, I said, go, she needed to go in and do something. She went and she said, the door's locked. Did you bring your cell phone or keys out here? I said, no. She said, because she always has her cell. I said, you don't have your cell phone? No. We couldn't use the automatic garage door opener. It was battery, but it's electric, and it was locked. All the windows were locked. So we were locked out of our house. Yeah, right. So we were literally locked out of our house with 16 inches of snow there. And what are we going to do? So we thought no windows were open. So I went to a neighbor's house and knocked on the door. What one thing I could figure, I had to borrow his extension ladder and take it around through the snow to the back of the house, set it up. Fortunately, it was high enough. I held it because Tammy wasn't going to let me go up there with no feeling in hands and stuff. She had to climb up the ladder, climb over the rail of the deck. Fortunately, we have a deck on the second story floor from the ground. And we always leave the sliding door of the deck unlocked because nobody can get to it. But yeah, she had to climb up, knock snow off the rail, climb over, trudge through the deck, and go into the house, and then we were in. Thankfully, that worked out. But this disruption, I guess the point is this disruption in life, had for a few days, and it's still cold, and we're still dealing with it. We can have things in life thrown at us that throw us off, don't we? But along with that, during the snowstorm, there were some positives as I look back. There were some good things. I read more. I had some time to myself to sit down, and I think I actually got through a couple of books, which was good. We don't, because we're coming and going. We don't, especially in the winter, don't see or talk to our neighbors much. But when something like that happens, we were out talking with our neighbors and helping each other. And we have more of an elderly lady that lives beside us. Tammy went over to her house next door and shoveled out her driveway and sidewalk. We're able to do something for our neighbor, talk to some, see how to catch up with them in their life and build a little relationship. Even though sometimes we were sitting there we were tired of reading or waiting to do something else, I had time to think and reflect. I learned I could actually live without Netflix and Hulu and didn't have to have a television on sometime to pass the time. But I learned some lessons as well. And so even though it was a disruptive time, it was different. It was scary. It was, anxious moments. If I could think back and focus on what good happened, there were some good things that God allowed me to do as well. And I'm sure you could think of some positives. Maybe say you got to spend time with your daughter and grandchild, and maybe you didn't get to spend that quality time with them, or whatever it might be. Right. Yeah. The snow really dampens the sound, and there's not as many cars out. And it's quiet, and it's pretty, and it's different, and there's a freshness about it. And so there were some good things. And in life, I guess I would just say, in relating this to the Israelites crossing the Red Sea through it, is that life probably is going to present us with many Red Sea moments and journeys. And if we can learn through our faith and through prayer to tune out the chaos that can happen, sometimes the dangers, many times the fears, and focus on, keep our faith and focus on God, or like Peter, our eyes on Jesus, it allows us to be able to take that first step and go into the water, into the sea. And we can begin and or keep moving towards God's rescue, God's salvation, to the promised land, because that's where the Israelites were going. So a lot of this is spiritual, perspective. But I've found that it's hard to have sometimes that spiritual perspective when a lot of chaos and bad things are swirling around us. Maybe we've noticed that some with the COVID pandemic, and now the Omicron increase, that it's brought many challenges and many sad things and disrupted our lives. But has God worked through these tragedies and done some good things as well? And he certainly has kept us moving forward. We've still been able to minister to people as a church body here, even through these times, haven't we? Still making meals for the homeless, still giving food out at the pantry, still helping people in benevolence. We've seen new faces come into our worship that are craving somehow fellowship and being with other believers, or just to worship with somebody. We've built new relationships. We've learned new things about ways of doing church that we never thought of. So God's bringing us through this trip through the Red Sea as well. A lot of these devotionals, I think I told you when we began, this was an old book that's on my shelf. This is what I'm using a lot for the Bible study. When the season is dry, a promise and a wilderness. And the author, every now and then after a few chapters, will put a poem in. I'm assuming he's writing some of these poems, Timothy Allen. And about this walking the Red Sea and how we need to keep our eyes on God. He writes this little poem. He titles it "The Voice Between the Waves." The voice between the waves. Waters recede, coiled under a splashing deposit of silted spray. Caught in the frenzy, they return with the new wave to pound out another voice, lasting just moments before being drowned in the furor of still more speeches. A voice between the swells calls for my attention, caught between what goes out and what is coming in, between tides of change trying to wash away centuries of accumulated wisdom, an ebb and a flow that, like the passing fads of youth, tries but never conquers the sands of old. This sandy siren calls to me between the pounding of the waves, and I strain to hear her thundered and then gurgled words. Sometimes that's how it feels, isn't it? As we maybe walk through some muddy waters of life, we hear so many voices and so many directions and so many opinions, and from our past and from our present. Can we learn to spiritually block those out where we can hear the reassuring, saving voice of God? And I think that'll make our journey a lot better and more doable. Okay, we'll stop there and look at another adventure from the Israelites the next time we're together.